Hello there, and thanks for joining me for another episode of Massalia Tales. In the previous episode we saw the end of that gigantic battle at Iska, where eventually, after a very long slog and a lot of desperate rear attacks, we managed to overcome the Iceni forces at great loss to our own. We then saw a very easy battle that was easily won by Artemius and the Daemons over at Petrodava, which allowed us to capture the settlement. Now, in the aftermath of the battle, Eutychus advanced to finish off all of the survivors, with his army, having not taken part in the battle, still fully intact. He continued on to try and conquer some Iceni lands, but found they still had plenty of strength left. He faced a difficult battle, but luckily he had some ideal terrain, was able to deploy over several hills, and in the end beat out the enemy's theoretically superior force with his heavy infantry and cavalry advantage. Then Heraclides also saw a battle against the Iceni, this time a garrison sallying out against him. The garrison was at a disadvantage and they played the battle exactly as Heraclides would have liked, attacking his strong points, allowing him to totally surround and destroy them, meaning that town is very likely going to be ours. Let's continue. Before the remaining townspeople of Iska had finished burying their dead, the forces of Eutychus and Heraclides were smashing on the doors of their attackers. Eutychus, spurred on by a victory over a larger force, was starting to find his mettle as a military leader. Heraclides, however, was losing his. It had always been an unwanted campaign, and the level of death and destruction it was bringing to both sides meant his dream for a flourishing peace in Britannia was soured, to say the least. But the issue was no longer in his hands. The success of the campaign had secured Bendis the power he needed to dictate policy towards not only Britannia, but all of the Celtic lands beyond Massalia's increasingly militarized borders. We're in the aftermath of Heraclides' battle against the Iceni at Camulden, where you can see the enemy army has been pretty much decimated. We're going to release the captives, and with only a few units left, we're very likely to take that settlement now, so that's all well and good. Now as we move on, we get an offer from the Sack of Rauka. Not the first time they've made an offer like this. They want me to pay them in exchange for peace, clearly underestimating the balance of power between our factions, so we are of course going to turn that offer down. Then Hayastan comes to me. They want some money and they also want military access. And you can see Hayastan is actually about equal to us in power. They control tons of land, especially on our border at Mesopotamia. So maybe we do actually want to listen to what these guys have to say. We can't really trust these guys. They're a different religion and they're a treacherous expansionist power, but we're going to go with the deal for now. So now, we're back in the next turn where Heraclides is going to check the auto-resolve against this garrison army. You can see we have total advantage here, so we can auto-resolve our way into the town. This is, of course, the Iceni capital, so we're striking a key blow. It's also the capital of Britannia, the most important of the regions to hold, and it's now ours. This means all of southern Britannia is in our command, which is very useful for us. This is the good bit, essentially, and we're now going to move on just to take the other parts of Britannia so that we can unify it. I'm not so concerned about the rest of the British Isles to the north and west there, because we're not really going to need total domination over the area. We're just subduing the Iceni effectively. So for Eutychus, he moves west, where the survivors of his last battle are hanging around in the mountains. They ran away when I advanced, so I had the option of either heading on west to the settlement or chasing them down. I ended up deciding that since the settlement isn't going anywhere, we might as well chase after these forces and kill them. It will mean we can't go to the settlement this turn, but unless the Iceni have another hidden army around here somewhere, there's going to be nothing stopping them just waiting a turn and then going to the settlement, so that should be fine. We move in, auto-resolve that battle, absolutely fine, and Eutychus is also releasing captives, not really knowing what to do with them. He also ranks up very handily, so he will now start moving towards the settlement and will arrive next turn, where it should be a relatively easy capture. Now jumping back over to Artemius, where he's considering leading the Daemons of Polymus north against the Catioroi. The one condition where I wouldn't do it was if they would be my client state. So I went to diplomacy. There's a low chance of peace and of course an even lower chance of client state. I threw in tons of money to see if it changed their mind, and of course it doesn't. So even though they're at a massive disadvantage in this war, the Catioroi are not going to back down. The only way to end the war is going to be to end them. And so that falls to Artemius and the Daemons of Polymus, who need to move north. And interestingly, there's a Scordisci army sitting up there. They're one of my client states, so I was hoping that once I get there they'll be able to help me out, making this campaign a little bit easier. Now I needed to be a tiny bit careful moving out of Petrodava. Since we only just captured it, there was a chance there would be unrest if our force moved away, but it was absolutely fine actually. Basically anywhere that gets conquered by Massalia likes being in the Massalian Republic so much that we don't really have public order penalties anywhere, which is very useful. Now Evios is abandoning his siege of the Sakharalka capital. I'm hoping this will prompt the Archibosphorus forces to make an attack. You can see they've got 2 stacks just waiting. They've been there for a couple of turns, they've even got a navy nearby who they could come into blockade themselves, so I don't know what they're waiting for, but hopefully this will prompt them to make an attack. And now I get a message telling me there's a high chance of a civil war. It basically means the Timouchoi is becoming too powerful right now, but of course the Timouchoi doesn't care, so we're just going to continue on and see if that has any consequences. Crassius is moving very slowly east, having to make a lot of river crossings to try and get onto the border with Persia. Meanwhile, he left behind Epaphroditos here in Muscat to prepare a fleet to help him make an invasion of Persia if it comes to it. Unfortunately, Persia have a fleet of their own which is effectively blockading the port by just sitting right in front of us with the zone of control. So it's a little bit suspicious. They seem to suspect us, in fact. Anyway, we've now got some construction options, having finished converting the docks over to Hellenic-style ones. A wide variety of ships, including fire ships, but of course we can't really depend on fire ships, so we're going to have a decent number of actual assault craft as well in our navy. Now for Artemios, we're in the next turn, so he can continue his movement. We can get all the way to the Catioroi settlement. Inside is an army of 14 units unknown, and the Scordissi army is still there. I go in to start the battle. I expected the Scordissi army to support me in this assault, but they don't, and the enemy have a giant advantage. Tons and tons of horse archers in their leading army, so a pretty dangerous force. This is basically the force that the Daemons Eponymous would be weak against. They could just be peppered and skirmished away. Now it turns out that although the Scordissi are standing next to the Catioroi's capital, they're not actually at war with them, which is what I presumed they were doing. And actually I should have guessed that because they were too close to the settlement. They're in the zone of control, so if they'd been at war they wouldn't have been allowed to get so close. So I actually just paid them some money so that they are at war, although it still doesn't allow me to auto-resolve that fight back over there. So now for Eusticus, we are going to auto-resolve this fight here against the Iceni garrison. I actually lose 30% of my army, which is a decent amount, but I was so confident of victory that I thought it myself. I couldn't actually bring myself to do it to get a better result. So we go ahead, we do lose a unit unfortunately and take casualties across the rest of the army, quite heavy actually. But I don't foresee Eusticus fighting another battle in the near future, so we're going to leave him garrisoned here to get his forces back together, and of course we're going to invest money to start converting all the buildings to suit our needs. Now Heraclides is immediately able to start moving north towards the final province of Britannia, where he encounters yet another Iceni garrison. This one's really strong, it's got upgraded equipment, absolutely loads of units and lots of experience as well. So it seems the Iceni are going to put up a stand here at this settlement. They've even got a general outside supporting, but of course I can even just siege them out. There's no real pressure to continue on. Those final 2 regions I'll be able to make my client state once I've captured this one, so we'll just leave them probably. There's that bar saying that I have a high civil war chance, but the Timouchoi doesn't care about having a high civil war chance. In fact, they'll take the opportunity to reward the loyal members of the Timouchoi with promotions, which will actually make the situation worse, but perhaps they're not concerned with that. Is it a threat? A threat to themselves is all it is. If they want to ignore our orders, then all that does is give some material for the execution mandate. In fact, I think I'll have them written up anyway in advance, so that if they do pull anything, we don't have to dally getting the response to be official. We'll need one for Homer, of course, probably Evios too. Well, basically everyone who never appears at the council and never sends apologies has probably gotten a little bit too big for their elected boots. Truthfully, if the council makes a move, we'll just dismember them. And if that move happens to involve having another go at Crassius, then great. I'll finally get a reason to sit in his seat. So no, none of this is a threat. It's just a step up to the throne. So now I start moving into the next turn, and the Iceni that Heraclides had under siege want a battle. The auto-resolve results are absolutely terrible, despite us having the advantage, so yet again we're going to have to fight this one ourselves. This one's going to be pretty similar to the battle that Heraclides just fought, so we're not going to spend too much time looking at this. Basically, as the battle began, I rushed forwards because there was some nice terrain right in front of the enemy's deployment zone. You can see cavalry and chariots wandering off into the centre of the field to get around the enemy's army, and the main force setting up on a small hill with a ridge behind it, perfect for the skirmishers to sit on while the enemy advanced towards them. On the left there's these taller hills which I could have moved up onto if I had time, but the enemy was too near. My cavalry of course could get up there, so they'll have a nice position from which to charge down. I'm also going to send the dogs around that side as well, so they can charge down the hill behind the enemy's lines. The enemy are doing exactly what I need them to in the situation, just committing their melee infantry to come and fight mine. They don't have the advantage, so you could argue the AI should never actually attempt to do this, but they're going to do it. Very kind of them. We've got a pike phalanx ready, we've got legionaries, and the legionaries have javelins, so we're going to be able to throw some missiles at them as they advance. The enemy's javelins do pretty much no damage to me because my armor and health values are so high that they can't take out my troops with their missile units as they come in. Their missile weapons, sorry. So we see similar engagements to that, pretty much along the entire line where the enemy can't win. They'll fight against me until they lose essentially, so I could just walk away from the computer and probably win at this point, but we're going to be a bit proactive. You can also see my pelters engaging in a javelin battle with some of the enemy's units here, and we are winning significantly, cutting the enemy down with those missiles. So my lancers make their attack on the enemy's rear. These enemy local slingers stand absolutely no chance against cavalry attacks, so we're just going to mow right through them. Meanwhile, part of the main line is already starting to fall back as well, so that's going to free up some of my units, and I could use them to outflank the enemy, not that I particularly need to because we have such an advantage. So very shortly after this you can see more units starting to fall back, a massive part of my line now freed up to start attacking enemies in other places. And here I've released the dogs onto the flank, coming down to attack this enemy unit, which otherwise was doing okay actually right on the extreme flank because it really leveled up. Now we have such domination behind the enemy's lines that I can just do stuff like this, hit my chariots into the back of their blobs of infantry. Interestingly, once the chariots get in, they're essentially just stuck there. Now surrounded by enemy spearmen, they just stop and wait around, and that of course gives the spears a chance to attack them. But luckily for me, at this point their morale breaks, so they don't take them out, and now that they're running, my chariots can get in gear once again and start killing the enemy as they attempt to escape along with my other infantry. So we just need to finish off this battle, a few missile units and odd units that haven't engaged yet to kill. A heroic victory comes about pretty rapidly. We barely lost any troops, the Iceni took significant losses. This was really the Iceni's last chance to make a significant dent in our progress, and they have utterly failed. So we can now have a little look at the battle results. You can see double-figure losses for us, over 2,500 losses for the enemy. Absolutely devastating for the Iceni. Heracles barely even noticing the effect of that battle on his army. So this means there's going to be almost nothing in this settlement, and we'll take it with auto-resolve in the next turn. Now as we moved on, the Catioroi sallied out to attack the Daemons of Polymus, and this time it's quite a different situation. They have a gigantic advantage with their spam horse archers army, with tons of foot archers as well. I decided I didn't want to fight that, especially with the Daemons of Polymus, so I just walked away. Now in the next turn I'm going to make that auto-resolve against the Iceni's last settlement in Britannia. 93% of the force remaining, we cut the enemy down easily. So this means we have unified Britannia, or the province of Britannia I should say. We've taken all of the 4 regions that we need. We can now potentially start using edicts, and most importantly get all the buildings we want set up, so this province is going to be totally Hellenized and under our control. And now I can go into the next phase of my plan, where I basically get the Iceni's remaining forces to surrender, and they accept my deal, becoming my client state. So perhaps they'll rebel. They don't actually like me very much, but right now we've got peace, and they're going to be sending us plenty of tributes to keep it that way. Next up was the Ebdani in Ireland. I also wanted to make my client state. I was even willing to buy their support by giving them tons of cash, but they weren't willing to go in for it, so I thought we're going to have to take a slightly more drastic approach to get the Ebdani to submit. I didn't want to have to get boats and go across to actually attack them, so all I did was first declare war on them, calling no allies in, so a small simple war between the Republic and the Ebdani, and then I came back to them, and their tune has totally changed, because now they're at war with us, they realise they're in huge trouble, so now they are quite willing to be my client state, but interestingly not willing to trade with us, despite us having pretty much all of the trade resources of the world available. But anyway, we get the clienthood, so we have now totally subdued all of the British Isles. There are now no enemies out here in the northwest corner of the map for us to worry about, only client states who could rebel, but I'm hoping over time the relations between everyone will gradually improve and we'll get a stable situation like we do have in Gaul. So now, jumping back to our Timios. We're in winter, so at first I thought, oh, I'll just come out of the Catirois province to make sure I don't take attrition. But of course I realised that the Scordisci, who I've brought into this war, are now actually besieging the enemy's capital and have a decent chance of taking it by the looks of things. If I support them, that is. So I decided to try and support them, and luckily for me, you can see on the map it's just about green around the area where the enemy's capital is, and in fact, yes, there is no attrition right up at the extent of my movement point, so I can safely come in to support that siege if the Scordisci make an attack. Unfortunately, Archebosphorus, you can see, still haven't made that attack on Sakarauka. Don't know what they're waiting for. They've actually moved some of their forces away. I'm not sure it's even ever going to happen at this stage. The deeds asked are done, and the history is written. For now, Massalia rules these lands. The goods made by the people of Britannia now pour into the markets of Iberia, Africa, Asia and Arabia, and with them goes the wealth of this island. There is no great gain for the people when every merchant and governor exists only to pass money back to their estates in Provincia. Soon we shall hear less of Wodan and more of Apollo, less of the rasp of their dialects and more of the cackle of ours. And it is all for the best, I must keep telling myself. This is what peace in Britannia looks like. The only way it could ever look in a world where children like Bendis are gifted the strings to a city that rules all it lays eyes upon. Things will have to change a lot to bring hope of anything better. Now, something interesting I noted while managing Mesopotamia was that there are foreign armies guarding all of my settlements rather kindly. We've got Hayastan and the Ptolemaics guarding my 3 regions in Mesopotamia, and then curiously, I'm actually right now guarding Egyptian settlements right here, though only by accident. And then I noticed this random Cyprus army sitting in the desert in a fort right on the border. No idea what they are up to, so I decided to just see who they were. They're a satrapy of the Egyptians and they're Hellenic, so they're probably not going to get up to no good against us, but it was just strange to see them behaving like that. Now in the next turn, there's an offer of marriage for Crassius. You might remember his wife was assassinated because the council keep trying to kill him and his wife was lost in one of the struggles. So I decided to allow this marriage. This will give Crassius a new wife, so I'm going to go and check her out. You can see she appears in his household here, and unfortunately it's a drunken wife, reducing his authority and gravitas. Now this will not stand. Crassius is an ambitious man who is not going to allow his reputation to be tarnished by being mistakenly married to this woman. So, since he's the head of the Timouchoi and can do basically whatever he wants, he just secretly has her killed and throws money at the problem. So, we're back to where we were before. There was no actual marriage in the end. Now, I've got a spy who I've recruited here in Britannia. I was going to use them to scope out the Iceni, but now they're my client state, I can see everything they have and I don't need it. My plan for Britannia is to move Eustochus out of the island. Heraclides is going to stay around for now, just to be a garrison in our bastion here near the edge of the map, but Eustochus could probably be best used elsewhere. Now, in the next turn, Artemius was not called in to help with the Scordisci attack on Tur here, so he is going to move in close and fortify, so that if they do make a siege assault, he will take part in the battle, and that should turn it in our favour. Now, down in Mascat, I'm considering what to do on the Persian front. I want to cross the seas and invade Persia, if I can. But at home we have the issue that we can't get rid of desert nomadic culture. I have a dignitary here attempting to do so, but you can see there's a massive cultural influence towards desert nomadic culture, whatever that might be. And it's because of this guy, Senkamisken, a super high level sage who belongs to Saba, who are my allies from the west. So we're going to have to just ignore that and try and do what we can. Now the Scordisci do make that attack on Tur, and it's actually a super auto-resolvable battle because the Spartan armies appear from nowhere and do the same thing as I'm doing, supporting the attack. In the battle we lose basically nothing, and neither do the Spartans. The Scordisci take the brunt, but of course they get the reward as well because they'll take the settlement. So very nice of my ally Sparta to magically appear in order to help me with this battle. You can see they brought up 2 stacks, the second one not making it in time. So, with the Catirois now destroyed This area is now pretty much secure. We're allied everywhere except for this one Saka settlement, which we still need Archibosphorus to take if we're going to totally fulfill our vision for what Archibosphorus is going to be. There's a random Saka admiral who has strayed into our waters, so Evios is going to quickly sail out and take them out. Evios has repaired his ships and got his navy back up to full strength, even recruiting new boats, so we have this powerful navy and we might as well attempt to use it to support Archibosphorus if we can. And right now we actually do have the chance, because you can see Saka have put their army in a fleet in the sea. So if we can engage them, that would be ideal, although of course they're likely to land, so we probably shouldn't hold our breath on that one. And you can see Archibosphorus have totally abandoned their offensive campaign against the Saka capital. No idea what they're doing right there. So now back with the build-up against Persia, I thought I might now be able to make my attack. My navy is better than theirs, so I can definitely break out of the port and start sailing north towards their lands. But I sent a spy out who discovers the enemy have another navy waiting in their ports, so I might actually need a bigger naval force. So I'm going to delay operations and continue to expand my naval power out of the ports here, so that we can definitely make sure we can deliver troops to the enemy's shores safely and defeat enemy navies in naval battles if they happen. Crassius is ready on the border to attack at any time. Now another trouble we're going to face is one of diplomacy. You can see here that Persia is allied in with several factions, most notably the Egyptians and highest down the Armenians, the two massive empires that surround me and them in this area. So we would be rolling a dice if we just declared war on them out of the blue, because we might lose those massive allies. So I wanted to try and see if the Horde of the Steppe would allow me to join their war, which they for some reason have against Persia. But of course they absolutely hate me, and according to who they're at war with, they hate everyone. So that's not going to happen, and that's actually going to put a spanner in the works of my plan to legitimately invade Persia. Hopefully the bastard Bendis will learn how I feel about his little jokes, and I will certainly learn not to trust his offers again. He had claimed that the woman was a favourite of the council's biggest movers, so I could spread my influence to them with a simple remarriage, and of course it was all quite the opposite. I haven't been able to walk the streets of a city for so long. Every pair of eyes are those of hungry dogs with nothing to lose and the council's coin purse to gain. They take my freedom, they take my wife, and they do all they can to take my lands, all to satisfy their own jealousy, with not a thought for the glory of the Republic or the welfare of the people. Let the Council and its supporters meet Hades long before the likes of I. Now I thought you might be interested to see just the extent to which Massalia dominates the world right now, or I should say our coalition of allies. Here you can see the yellow territory is Massalia's direct holdings, and the blue territory is our allies and the territory of our client states, and quite clearly it extends over basically the entire known world. We have complete domination, a huge and relatively stable situation where most of the major players are all allied together, and it's only minor factions like these hordes of the steppe and the Sakarauka who are actually causing conflict. So it does mean there's not much room for expansion without going against our allies. There is still room in the east. There's Bactria and Hayastan, who I'm not directly allied to, who are a potential large enemy. You can also see here on the public order display, all of our territory is absolutely ecstatic with how things are going. And some of our newer territories are growing. You can see a lot of the territory isn't growing because it's basically at its maximum population capacity. But anyway, it's nice to see that we are dominating so much. And while I was looking at that, I wondered how close we actually were to the victory conditions. And you can see we're really close to military victory. We've totally destroyed the number of settlements we need to have under control / allied control. And we've got as many units as we need. We just don't control Armenia. That's part of the Hayastan Empire, the big faction to the east who we don't really have a hold against right now. So if we could attack them, we could actually make the victory condition quite easily. Economic victory a little bit further away. We've got a lot of the conditions, all the military and trade related ones, but we don't have enough money for income. You need to have a gigantic income to get this one, and we don't have enough civil tech. We've got a lot of military tech instead. Cultural victory, we need a lot of extra regions. Basically a lot of African regions need to be taken, so we need to go to war with the Egyptians to get this one, and we need some special buildings and things like that. So it's military victory we're closest to, and that's one that's actually achievable, so it's good to keep that in mind. Now we're going to move on And actually, with all of our wars concluded, I thought we might be about to go into a period of peace, but then this happens to spoil it. The Nervii, one of my allies to the north, declare war on the Illyrian Confederation, my big ally who controls Italy and all of Illyria. So I could just decline to enter this war and break my alliance with the Illyrian Confederation, but I really didn't want to do that because of how closely they are entwined with my territory, and attacking the Nervii would be an opportunity for Bendis, who is currently standing right on their border, to take some gains for himself. So I thought probably we would enter this war, so we're going to go ahead with it. Right at the beginning, the Nervii send in an army towards Ubersis, and this is where Bendis is stationed. You can see his forces here, really able to just counterattack them in their current position, so they put themselves in a weak spot. Here on the map you can see that Bendis is basically in a salient we have that goes in between the Nervii's two blocks of territory. Their bigger block is the one to the east. You can see they have several large settlements and they're all heavily defended right now, so I'm guessing these armies are probably going to turn in and start swarming over Ubersis, so we can expect to see heavy attacks if the enemy commit everything to this assault. We don't have that much available to actually help out, but one thing we can do is move Eustachius, who is now linked up with the fleet at Iska, and have him sail to attack the Nervii homeland here, which he can attack by sea by sailing upriver and then landing right next to them. It's going to take him a really long time to get there, so we have to survive a decent number of turns of their attack, but once he arrives he'll be able to strike a killing blow by taking their capital. But first things first, it's time for Bendis to just attack their fortified position here. The army doesn't appear to be anything special, it's similar in size to mine, and you can see the balance bars slightly in our favour. We have a giant advantage in terms of our training. Our troops are elite compared to the enemies. The enemy will have the terrain of the fort to help them out, but I think once they overcome the power of the fortifications, their soldiers won't fight for long against our elite, well-drilled troops. So it's time for Bendis to fight his first battle and get this war started, hopefully in our favour, and we'll see how it continues in the next episode. The union of the great powers of the world was blocked by the intentions of those on opposite sides. The Hayastan Empire, strongly linked to the neighbouring Egyptian Empire, controlled the trade routes to the mysterious and highly lucrative markets of the Eastern world, markets that Massalia, as the trading giant of the Western world, wanted to enter. The key would be to control the province of Armenia, the central point from which trade between West and East could be based. But that was the heartland of Hayastan, and was by no means possible to bargain for. And so, if Massalia wanted to truly dominate the world, it would need to take Armenia by force, a project the other powers would almost certainly oppose with violence.